Hello, this is Troy-Mebane. Thank you for watching my digital presentation called Breaking the Code, Textual Analysis of Corporate Workplace Dress Codes. Corporate America reflects widely held beliefs in society, and as such, corporate dress codes reflect the culture and generally accepted attitudes of our modern time. I posit that socially constructed ideologies widely communicated within organizations are subtly suggesting what the desired race of its leaders should be. Companies in the financial services industry have amended their dress code policies to allow for women and people of color as they have entered the workforce, but they still deem certain things to be rebellious or non conservative, or even more so, inappropriate to the image that has been cultivated by generations of employees in the financial services industry. The question is, how does a standard dress requirement that's grounded in the traditional taken for granted system of white privilege and executed by those who benefit from that system decide what is an appropriate hairstyle for those who were never intended to be part of the professional workforce to begin with? Critical theorists agree that race in the workplace is only relevant when it serves organizational interests and is generally viewed by the white powers that be as a separate, singular concept that is only of interest to people of color. It was unanimous in assessing that indeed white privilege does exist in organizations, but much as current society is conducted in more careful and subtle ways than obvious discriminatory actions prevalent before the civil rights movement. Barry Brummett describes close reading as the mindful, disciplined reading of an object with a view to a deeper understanding of its meaning. Socially shared meanings are supported by those things we see in everyday life, such as words, images, objects, actions, and messages, and often implicitly communicate misinformation about non-white populations. Those who see instances of hidden messages have the responsibility to share those messages with others that have the ability to understand the explanation so that eventually the meaning is understood by many and becomes a fact rather than merely an opinion. Within my reading, each of the scholars also agree that Blacks in positions to influence the opinions of others must publicly campaign for any misleading information to be uncovered so that those in power positions are forced to remove biases from the workplace. Discovering biased ideologies and taking actions to overcome them are key components to the work of critical theorists and align with contemporary worldviews regarding organizational diversity. An ideology is a pattern of beliefs that determines a group's interpretations of some aspect of the world. Another important question is, does the predominant group's interpretation of workforce standards parallel with the notion held by scholars from the critical tradition that oppression exists in society? The concept of textual reading is rooted in the idea that oppressive messages driven by white privilege are hidden in various aspects of everyday life. Since workplace organizations are a facet of life, then naturally a ideological analysis through a critical lens is appropriate for a textual analysis of a corporate workplace dress code. I chose to examine one specific Fortune 500 company in my local area where I am employed and found that no official dress code issued by corporate headquarters exists. However, there are several that were distributed to specific segments of the population by different lines of business. Every code has some basic, generally accepted ideas about things that both blacks and whites can agree with, such as good hygiene, clean clothes, and name tags. But they also all contained a subjective notion about hairstyles, summarized in one sentence that says, if you are uncertain about the appropriateness of a particular item of clothing, accessory, or hairstyle, err on the side of conservatism and discuss it with your manager prior to wearing it to work. An important discussion question is, what is conservative and appropriate? I posit that these two adjectives mean whatever the white power structure and organizations decide that it means. Therefore, my textual analysis, focusing on the dress code, will be looking for examples of subtle discrimination illustrated through the corporate dress text, demonstrating scientific management theories of leadership, stereotypical beliefs about black populations, and subtly practicing the notion of oppression. Scientific management theories, first introduced by Frederick Taylor, posit that managers and leaders should be white middle-class men. Of course, this was the popular thinking of that particular period of time because white men created, shaped, and enforced that notion. Similarly, shirts and ties visually divide those charged with thinking from those tasked with doing, which is also a critical component of scientific management theories because there is a clear division of labor between worker and manager. Workers in some industries adopted the business suit as a way to present an image of professionalism, expertise, and ambition to those within the organization as well as society at large. As diverse populations began to enter the workforce, it became mandatory for management to update their dress code since white men were no longer the only people in the workplace. Therefore, management decisions about appropriate hygiene, jewelry, the showing of skin were outlined in conjunction with their ideas about appropriate hairstyles. Subtle racism is inherent in corporate dress codes because the ideologies that created them are rooted in theories based upon the idea of white privilege. Therefore, employees that do not meet the professional look that was created and shaped by the white men who were the leaders in the organization will not succeed within a company. Hairstyles such as dreadlocks, braids, and cornrows are generally accepted hairstyles for Black people, but are outside of the established rules of dress that have been mandated in corporate organizations. Companies tend to penalize Blacks that do not conform to what is considered appropriate or conservative because these hairstyles are stereotypically perceived by the white elite management as an indication of criminal tendencies or deviancy. As a result, upward mobility within an organization is extremely difficult for those that don't comply with the established image of a leader. Therefore, Blacks practice mandated consent regarding hairstyles in corporate workplaces. They are encouraged by organizations to oppress their own cultural norms in favor of adopting those of the dominant power structure. My conclusions are that this topic is relevant. Many people are unaware that they enjoy certain advantages in everyday life because of their white skin. It's a taken for granted system that has dominated society for so long that it is generally accepted by all as the way things are. Organizations publicly strive to promote career growth and development of minorities due to modern worldviews that people of color are capable of expertly performing in roles that require critical thinking. In other words, people of color should not automatically be relegated to production-related tasks simply because of their race. However, coaching and grooming always call for minority employees to improve upon leadership qualities that are based solely upon norms organized by whites, grounded in the notion of white privilege. Self-actualization within an organization is based on what white people believe those words symbolize. And all employees must assimilate and align themselves with those concepts and ideologies in order to be successful. Because our culture is one that celebrates diversity and inclusion, Senior leaders must be cognizant of the subtle ways that white privilege operates within the workplace and take proper steps to ensure biases, no matter how unintentional, are formally addressed and resolved. This aspect of organizational communication will become even more important as the world continues to progress towards a more global society. Companies must acknowledge that current truths about the workplace may be challenged as foreign companies with different truths continue to increase their influence on domestic bottom lines. Further research questions may be: should it be assumed that managers are aware of biases in corporate dress codes? Or are managers subtly acknowledging the socially constructed power structure and acting as enforcers of generally accepted rules regarding the workplace?